Look at this plate. Looks delicious, right? What if I told you that this simple meal represents one of the darkest turning points in human history? That potato, it cost Ireland 1 million lives. Those tomatoes, they arrived in Europe after epidemics wiped out tens of millions of Native Americans. That corn, its global spread was tied to colonialism and slavery. And that chocolate, children are still working under dangerous conditions to produce it today. You see, 500 years ago, two worlds collided. We call it the Columbian Exchange, the moment Europe discovered the Americas. Your history books probably told you it was about brave explorers bringing civilization to a new world. What if I told you they lied to you? What really happened was the largest demographic collapse in human history. A catastrophe so devastating, it even changed the climate of our planet. And the food on your plate, it's the evidence. Every time you eat, you're consuming the legacy of mass death, slavery, and ecological destruction. And the most terrifying part, most people have no idea. Today, I'm going to show you the hidden cost of your plate. I'm going to reveal how your dinner was paid for with the lives of civilizations. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at food the same way again. Because the truth about what's on your plate, it's darker than you ever imagined. Let's start with a number that should terrify you. Around 56 million. That's how many Indigenous Americans are estimated to have died in the century after Columbus arrived. To put that in perspective, that's more people than died in World War I. In some regions, up to 90% of the population was wiped out. But here's what makes this even more horrifying. It wasn't just war that killed them. The deadliest weapons weren't swords or guns. They were invisible. Smallpox, measles, typhus. Diseases that Europeans had lived with for centuries, but to Native Americans, they were extinction events. When Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés marched on the Aztec Empire, disease weakened the population long before the final battles. Imagine this. You're living in Tenochtitlan, one of the largest cities in the world, bigger than Paris or London. Your civilization has roads, schools, hospitals, and floating gardens that feed 200,000 people. Then strangers arrive carrying invisible death. Within a few years, your city is a graveyard. Your children are dead. Your parents are dead. Your entire way of life gone forever. And here's the twisted irony. As entire civilizations died, their crops lived on. Corn, potatoes, tomatoes, chocolate, vanilla, peppers, foods cultivated by indigenous peoples for thousands of years spread across the world. These weren't just plants, they were the result of centuries of careful cultivation. Agricultural knowledge that often died with the people who created it. Let's talk about the potato, that innocent side dish that's probably sitting in your kitchen right now. For thousands of years, the Inca developed thousands of varieties of potatoes in the Andes Mountains. They had purple ones, yellow ones, ones that could survive freezing temperatures. It was agricultural genius. But when Europeans carried the potato to Europe, they ignored that diversity. They planted only a few varieties. The potato became Ireland's lifeline. By the 1840s, 1/3 of Irish people depended on potatoes for survival. Poor families ate nothing but potatoes, sometimes 10 to 14 pounds per person every single day. Then came 1845. A disease called potato blight swept across Ireland's genetically uniform potato crops. In the Andes, diverse varieties meant survival. In Ireland, there was no resistance. The Great Famine began. But here's what makes your blood boil. Ireland was still exporting food during the famine, while Irish families starved to death. Ships full of grain and cattle left Irish ports for England. 1 million Irish people died. Another million fled to America, forever changed. And all because the biological wisdom of the Inca, centuries of agricultural knowledge, had been ignored and lost. Every French fry you eat carries this story. Every bag of chips, every baked potato. They're all descendants of a stolen crop that cost 1 million lives, because Europeans relied on too little diversity. Now let's talk about sugar, the ingredient hiding in almost everything you eat. Sugar seems harmless, right? But sugar fueled one of the largest slave economies in history. And I mean that literally. Millions of enslaved Africans were forced to work on sugar plantations. Here's how the system worked, and it's more evil than any horror movie. Europeans couldn't grow sugar in Europe. It needed tropical heat. The Americas had the perfect climate, but epidemics had killed much of the native population. So they created a triangle of human misery. Ships left Europe with guns and manufactured goods. In Africa, they traded those goods for human beings. People stolen from their families, their communities, their entire lives. Then they sailed to the Americas, packed these people like cargo in conditions so horrific that about 2 million died during the journey alone. But the real horror was the sugar plantations. Enslaved people worked 18-hour days in brutal heat, cutting sugarcane that would slice their hands to ribbons. They were worked to death. The average lifespan of an enslaved person on a Caribbean sugar plantation was often less than 10 years, and when they died, they were simply replaced with more enslaved people from Africa. For centuries, this machine of death turned human suffering into sweet profit. By 1750, enslaved Africans made up the majority in many Caribbean colonies. Every candy bar, every soda, every dessert you've ever eaten, they all trace back to this system. The sweetness in your coffee was bought with human blood. And here's what should make you furious. The wealth built on sugar slavery didn't disappear when slavery ended. It became the foundation of some of today's biggest corporations and richest families. The money stolen from millions of enslaved lives is still circulating today. But the Columbian Exchange didn't just destroy human lives, it destroyed entire ecosystems. Before 1492, North America had tens of millions of bison. These massive herds shaped the entire landscape. They were like living lawnmowers, creating the Great Plains that fed indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Indigenous peoples had lived in balance with these herds for generations, taking only what they needed. Then came European settlers with a different idea. They slaughtered bison, not just for food, but for sport, for railroad expansion, for leather. By the late 1800s, fewer than 1,000 remained. An entire species nearly extinct in just a few centuries. But that was just the beginning. Europeans brought cattle, pigs, and horses, animals that had never existed in the Americas. These animals trampled native plants, competed for water, and spread diseases to native wildlife. They also brought weeds. Yes, weeds, dandelions, clover, and dozens of other European plants that crowded out native species. Today, some ecosystems are more European than American, even though they're on American soil. And here's the most mind-blowing part. The death of so many indigenous Americans actually cooled the planet. When millions of people died, their farms were abandoned. Forests grew back over millions of acres of cultivated land. These new forests absorbed so much carbon dioxide that global temperatures dropped slightly. Scientists call it the Little Ice Age of the 1600s. The demographic collapse was so massive that it changed Earth's climate. So here we are, back to your plate. That innocent dinner that started our journey. Now you know the truth. That potato represents the destruction of Inca agricultural wisdom and the death of a million Irish people. Those tomatoes arrived in Europe after epidemics killed tens of millions of Native Americans. That corn was tied to systems of slavery and exploitation. Every bite connects you to this history. Every meal is a reminder that our modern world was built on one of the greatest catastrophes in human history. But here's what's really disturbing. This isn't ancient history. The same patterns are still happening today. Your chocolate still relies on child labor in West Africa. Your coffee comes from farmers trapped in poverty. Your quinoa boom displaced indigenous communities in Bolivia. The Columbian Exchange never ended. It just got more sophisticated. And that brings us to the question that should keep you awake at night. If we're still repeating these patterns today, what does that say about us as a species? Are we the same people who stood by while civilizations were destroyed? Are we still choosing convenience over human dignity? Are we still trading lives for cheap food? The hidden cost of your plate isn't just history, it's happening right now in ways you probably don't even realize. Because if you think the dark side of food history is over, you haven't seen anything yet.